Is the voice okay? Is my voice okay?
Yeah, ma'am. This is fine.
I think Dr. Surendra.
We should start. It's already 6 o'clock.
Yeah, we may start. Yeah.
Okay. So should we start?
Just ma'am, please wait. Good evening to all of you. So I, on behalf of Indian Confederation of Medical Lab Sciences, ICMLS, welcome you all in this webinar series organized from 11 to 25th. This is our 9th day of this webinar series. And we have very learned speaker today, Dr. Vandana Puri from Lady Hardinge Medical College. She is Associate Professor of Pathology. And to moderate session, Dr. Sunita Sharma, he is the head of the Department of Pathology in Lady Hardinge Medical College. So I would like to Madam Dr. Sunita Sharma to moderate this session. Ma'am, over to you, ma'am, please.
Okay, so we start with this session. As we all know, the diagnosis of COVID is basically a microbiological diagnosis, right? But we have certain parameters in hematology also, which can affect the management and the prognosis of these patients. So I request Dr. Vandana, she's presenting the hematological findings in COVID-19. She's a very good orator and a very good teacher. And Vandana, so you're listening now.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. I have learned most of the hematology from Sunita, ma'am. In fact, whatever I am today, I owe her completely. I have been her postgraduate student, and now I'm working under her only. She's a very good hematopathologist. Okay, so with that overview, let's start with the hematological findings in COVID-19. So everybody knows that thanks to this lockdown, we all are doing a lot of webinars and probably learning more through this. So let's see what are the hematological findings, but I will be covering this session under the following headings. So we'll be starting with the introduction to COVID. We'll go to the statistics, okay, and then we'll start with the hematological findings in COVID, which will encompass CBC, peripheral smear, immune findings in the coagulation, and any other marker if available. And last, we'll take home some messages from the talk, okay. So now, all of us know that COVID has rapidly evolved. It has evolved from an epidemic outbreak in the China. And you all know that the COVID, how does it invades the cell? Through the ACE2 receptors. And it is a systemic disease. It involves multiple organs like cardiovascular system, respiratory system, GI, neurological, hematopoietic, and immune system. So if you look at the statistics of the world, okay, so we have about 4.79 million cases in the world now. And if we look at the statistics of India, we have more than 1 lakh cases, okay, as per yesterday's data. Yesterday itself, we had 5242 cases in one day. So that's a huge load and the cases are increasing every day. But let's look at the healthcare of our country. So our country spends only 1.02% of their of per capita on health, which is very, very low and has been increased to 3% recently. And we have only one doctor for 1,300, whereas WHO has that also varies from state to state. Okay, some states have a good ratio, some states have a very poor ratio. So what to do in this situation? So we can see that we have rising trends of cases. We have very poor manpower, high contagion of the virus, which is going to spread to so many people so fast. So now all the medical professionals will have to act like a superhero, isn't it? So they have to be learned, they have to be a superhero. They should know which investigations need to be done once the patient has been diagnosed as COVID positive. So now the patient comes to you as a COVID positive patient. Which investigations should be done, which will decide the course of the disease and therapy, and also will help you to understand prognosis of the patient. So let's see one case and go in a case-wise manner. So let's say this is a 47-year-old COVID positive male who presented with fever, cough and respiratory distress, and a complete blood count was done. So in complete blood count, the WBC count of this patient was 14,000, neutrophil count was 8,000, lymphocyte count was low, 2,000, eosinophil count was only 300, platelet count was 90,000, mildly decreased, and hemoglobin was also low, 8 gram. So what did we see from this CBC? We saw that WBC count is mildly increased, neutrophil count is mildly increased, okay, lymphocyte count is decreased, eosinophil count is decreased, the platelet count is also decreased, and the hemoglobin is also decreased. So what do we learn from this CBC? So if you search the literature, you will find that most common hematological findings in COVID positive patients are lymphocytopenia, neutrophilia, eosinopenia, mild thrombocytopenia, and less frequently thrombocytosis. So that was what was exactly seen in our case also, isn't it? So if we look at the progression of hematological finding during the incubation period of 1 to 14 days, when the patient does not have any symptom, lymphocyte counts are normal or they just start decreasing. But approximately 7 to 14 days from the onset of initial symptom, there will be surge in clinical manifestations because of cytokine storm. And we will get significant lymphopenia. And we will get significant lymphopenia. So now, so let's see exactly what is the predominant finding. So there was a very beautiful article which was published in American Journal of Hematology 2020 in the March issue, which studied approximately 296 patients. And in this study, that lymphocytopenia was a predominant finding in 68% of the cases, whereas this was closely followed by thrombocytopenia, which was seen in 22% of the cases, followed by leukopenia, which was seen in 12% of the cases. So lymphocytopenia was a very, very predominant finding that could be seen in this group of patients. So now what was the exact cause of lymphopenia in COVID patients? So actually, lymphocytes have ACE2 receptor on the surface. Therefore, COVID infects them and kills them. That's first theory. Whenever the virus comes in our body, immediately as soon as the virus comes in the body, this is identified by antigen presenting cells. So these antigen presenting cells will go and present this antigen to T helper 1 cells. So Th1 cells will immediately start releasing some interleukins, okay? So they will start releasing some interleukins like interleukin 2, and they will activate macrophages. So these macrophages will start releasing many cytokines, okay? So many cytokines like MCP1, MIP1, interferons, okay? Interleukin 6, all will be released. Apart from that, tumor necrosis factor alpha is also released. So many interleukins and cytokines are released together. This is what is called as cytokine storm. And this is responsible for majority of the features which we see in COVID patients. So these cytokine storm causes apoptosis of the lymphocyte. So we get loss of lymphocytes. Not only that, this cytokine activation also causes atrophy of the lymphoid organs like spleen. So this further impairs lymphocyte turnover. Now, all of you know that COVID patient, the complications from who gets more severe COVID positive manifestations, those patients who have significant comorbidities. Why? Because let's say cancer patient or kidney patient. So these patients usually have some metabolic abnormality like lactic acid acidosis. So this acidosis inhibits lymphocyte proliferation and therefore further causes lymphopenia. So many factors act together to cause lymphopenia, which is seen in COVID patient. Now, second manifestation that I told you is thrombocytopenia. And that also I told you that this is a mild thrombocytopenia. So why does a thrombocytopenia occurs in a COVID patient? So no, we all know, just now we have studied that there is lot of cytokine storm which is produced. So this cytokine storm destroys the platelet progenitors in the bone marrow. all of you know that the platelets arise from megakaryocytes. Okay, so these megakaryocytes are destroyed by cytokine storm. So that leads to thrombocytes. Second is, this is the virus which has entered into the body. So immediately our body will start producing antibodies against this virus, isn't it? So what will happen? Immune complexes will be formed. These immune complexes are removed by the spleen. And in this way, platelets are also removed. Or sometimes autoantibodies are formed in the against the platelets, and this leads to destruction of the platelets in the periphery. Not only that, all of you know that COVID patients have very high prevalence of lung injuries. So whenever we get lung injury in COVID patients, so platelet activation occurs because of endothelial injury. Platelet activation occurs. This platelet activation leads to formation of microthrombus, and microthrombus consumes all the platelets. So again, this causes thrombocytopenia. So if somebody asks you what is the cause of thrombocytopenia in COVID, remember, not only the production is decreased, but also destruction is also occurring in the periphery. Okay, so due to lung injury, due to immune complexes, destruction is also occurring, and cytokine storm is also destroying the progenitors in the bone marrow. Okay, that is why we will be seeing later on, because there is a lot of destruction which is occurring in the periphery, bone marrow, okay, megakaryocytes will start proliferating and they will start releasing proplatelets in the blood. So these proplatelets are little larger than the normal platelets. And that is why we will see in the morphological examination of COVID that you will see giant platelets or large platelets, okay. So large platelets are those which usually have a size more than 12 femtoliters, okay. So that you can say. But why don't you see megakaryocytic proliferation in the bone marrow now? Because megakaryocytes themselves are attacked by cytokine storm, okay. So that is why they are also being damaged, okay, in the marrow. So that's the cause for thrombocytopenia. So there was a very beautiful study which was published in the Platelets recently. So Platelet is a journal which predominantly deals with platelet studies, okay. So they've said, they made some statements which was very important. So they said that most of the cases, the platelet count does not decrease to a level at which bleeding occurs. Okay, so platelet count, because megakaryocytes still proliferate and keep the platelet count to the normal level. So platelet count does not decrease to the level at which bleeding occurs. Number one. Number two, they found that all the patients who presented with thrombocytopenia usually had lower WBC count, lower neutrophil count, lower lymphocyte count. Okay, and they have high levels of inflammatory mediators like C-reactive protein and procalcitonin than those without thrombocytopenia. So this was a very, very important finding. They said that those patients with thrombocytopenia usually have a lower lymphocyte count than the normal group, and they have higher inflammatory mediators in their blood. They also, whenever we talk about, platelet count is decreased, immediately what we try to study is platelet indices. So that's what they did, and they tried to study the platelet indices in COVID patients. So before going to the next line, let me just quickly give an overview of platelet indices. I'm sure all the people here would have seen a Coulter report. So when we the report or platelet count, you'll be seeing some parameters, isn't it? So let's see these parameters. So first parameter is mean platelet volume. So mean platelet volume is the volume of the thrombocyte, which is approximately 7.2 to 11.2 femtoliters. Okay. Then platelet distribution width. So just like red cell distribution width, this is platelet volume distribution width. This is indicator of volume variability in the platelet size. Okay. So again, it can vary in wide range, and it is given as percentage. Now coming to the next parameter, platelet crit. Platelet crit is a very simple parameter, just like hematocrit. It is nothing but platelet multiplied by MPV divided by 10,000. So it can be derived like this. Okay. So it is nothing but platelet into MPV divided by 10,000, and it is given as percentage. That's platelet crit. 0.2 to 0.24% is your platelet crit. Okay. And then you would have seen this parameter also very often, platelet large cell ratio. That is indicator of large platelets in the blood. So I told you large platelet means larger than 12 femtoliter, isn't it? So that's why this is called platelet large cell ratio. Or you would have seen immature platelet fraction, which is the percentage of immature platelets. So these are common platelet parameters which we normally study. So in this view, you all know what happens in patients of COVID, what happens to the size of the platelet. it becomes bigger, isn't it? So these patients will have higher levels of MPV and PLCR. So their mean platelet volume and platelet large cell ratio will be increased. As because these patients anemia, so platelet count will be decreased, and because platelet count is decreased, can I say platelet crit is also decreased? Because just now you've seen that platelet crit can be calculated. So normally platelet crit is also decreased in patients of these patients with thrombocytopenia in COVID. So that was platelet parameters which they studied in COVID. So now, once we are clear with this, so just to summarize, okay, what were the laboratory hematological findings that you started in COVID? You found that the WBC count is usually increased. Some studies say that it can be decreased also. Just now you started with whenever thrombocytopenia is there, in that cases, WBC count can be decreased also. Neutrophil count is increased. Lymphocyte count is decreased, eosinophil count is decreased, platelet count is decreased, and hemoglobin is also decreased. So these are the predominant hematological findings, CBC finding, which we have discussed. Okay. So can I say out of all the cells are decreased, but which cells are increased? Usually neutrophils are increased, whereas all the other cells have decreased. And you can see various studies in the literature which have tried to correlate absolute lymphocyte count with the manifestations of the COVID, absolute monocyte count with the manifestation of the COVID, and eosinophil count with the COVID manifestations. Okay. So now, once we have studied all this, so can we define severity on the basis of these CBC parameters? So can we decide that which are the group of patients who are going to go to ICU and who are not going to go to an ICU, or who are going to manifest with a severe disease on the basis of these CBC parameters? So there was again a study which was done in American Journal of Hematology, which was published, and they said that there are only two factors which actually statistically correlated with this finding. Okay. So absolute lymphocyte count was one of them. So they found that people who were admitted in the ICU had a very poor lymphocyte count. So they had a severe lymphopenia, and it was quite statistically significant. Also, they found that the LDH count in these patients were quite high. So with this was also statistically significant. So these were the two important statistical findings which came in the patients who were having severe disease versus non-severe disease. So there were other studies also which were done. So this was another study in another which related the group of people who died due to COVID, and who are the group of people who had a severe disease. So was there any difference between people who are going to die with COVID versus who are going to have a severe disease? So they found one thing, that whenever the WBC count is very high, significantly high, so these are the group of patients who usually die. We'll see later why this happens. Okay. Also, we found that both of them had, although WBC count is increased, but lymphopenia is seen in both of them. So both had significant lymphopenia. So they went forward and saw which subset of the lymphocyte decreased, whether CD4 decreased or CD8 decreased. So they found that there was decrease in both CD4 and CD8, and there was no reversal of the ratio which occurs in HIV. So here, no reversal of the ratio was seen. Both were decreased. However, they said that CD4 would serve as a clinical predictor of severity and prognosis. So CD4 was considered as a very good predictor of severity and prognosis. So that was one finding which was uniquely said here. So remember, there's no inversion of CD4 and CD8 ratio like which occurs in HIV here. Okay. So once we are clear with this, now, because majority of the studies which we just discussed didn't saw platelet as a significant factor, isn't it? So there was again a study which was done in platelets, and these were done on subsequent days, day 1, day 3, day 7, like that. And they found that those group of patients who had significant falling of the platelet count over days will not be surviving. Whereas those patients in which the platelet count was increasing or remained static, they usually survived. So they gave a guideline. So when they gave a guideline, they said those patients, so let's say a patient presented at admission with a platelet count of less than 2 lakh. So any patient who presented at admission with the platelet count of less than 2 lakh, and he saw that the platelet count decreased, okay, in the next 7 days. So these are the patients who are going to have a very poor survival probability. So their prognosis is going to be very bad. Now, again, in contrast to this, those people who have platelet count less than 2 lakh, but it increased over the next 7 days. So these are the group of people who already had a lower survival capability, but then it remained static because the platelet count started increasing. So then they said two other groups. Suppose the patient presented with platelet count more than 2 lakh. So they said if the platelet count increased, then they have a very good survival. Okay. Whereas if the platelet count started decreasing, so their survival also decreased. So what was their what does this statement says? This statement says that your platelet count at admission is also important, and your platelet count over the days is also very important. So if your platelet count is less than 2 lakh at admission and it decreases subsequently in 7 days, then the survival probability of this patient is going to go down. Whereas if the platelet count at presentation is more than 2 lakh and then it decreases in 7 days, then also the survival probability is going to go down. But it will not be so severe as compared to the patient who had a platelet count less than 2 lakh at presentation. You understand that? So that was a very beautiful study which came out. So once we are clear with this, then the earlier studies when the COVID was diagnosed, okay, in very earlier times, okay, so approximately 2 months back, so they used to say that patients with COVID usually die due to ARDS, and that at that time everybody was rotating around ARDS, okay, so that is acute respiratory distress syndrome. So they started finding that what was the parameters which correlated with ARDS. So there was a study which was published in March itself saying that let's study the parameters which correlate with acute respiratory distress syndrome. So they found that people who had increased neutrophils have more prevalence of ARDS. I hope you understand why. So if you know the pathogenesis of ARDS, you know neutrophils are the predominant cells, okay, which cause damage to the endothelium of the lung because they release an interleukin called interleukin 8, and this goes and damages the endothelium of the lung. And because endothelium of the lung is damaged, it tries to heal later on, okay, by forming hyaline membranes, So that is why the ARDS prevalence is high in those group of patients where the neutrophil count was high. Obviously, you know, once the lymphocytes are decreased, this is again going to increase the fatal outcome. The severity is going to decrease, severity is going to increase, okay. So what are the two important parameters correlate this incidence of ARDS? Then increased neutrophils and decreased lymphocytes. So these are two important parameters which correlated with the ARDS. Now again they said a very important statement here. So they said that if the patient had less than 20% lymphocytes on day 10 and less than 5% is left on day 17, so these patients are going to have fatal outcome. So what patients they defined had a fatal outcome? So they said you subsequently measure the lymphocyte count. If on day 10 your lymphocyte count is less than 20% and on day 17 the lymphocyte count falls to less than 5%, these are the group of patients who are going to have a very, very fatal outcome. Then they started using some ratios also, okay. So now all of you know that lymphocyte count is decreased in COVID. So obviously if you take a ratio of lymphocyte by whole WBCs, this ratio is going to be decreased. So they said there is decreased lymphocyte to WBC ratio. Then also you know that platelets are also decreased in COVID and lymphocytes are also decreased. So they started taking a ratio of platelet to lymphocyte. So they said because cytokine storm activates the platelets, so platelet falls, but this fall is usually mild. This usually is mild form, okay. So cytokine storm causes platelet activation also. So platelet count falls, but it is not very severe, okay. Lymphocyte count is low, so platelet to lymphocyte ratio becomes high. Platelet to lymphocyte ratio becomes high. So remember the ratios that were introduced by the JAMA intern medicine was lymphocyte to WBC ratio, which is decreased, and platelet to lymphocyte ratio, which was increased. And there are lots and lots of studies in the literature which are giving different cutoffs for identifying fatal outcome in patients of COVID. Not only that, there was one more ratio which was very important, and this we all have used in our labs always, isn't it? So what is this ratio? Neutrophil lymphocyte ratio, okay. So ratio of neutrophils to lymphocyte. all of you have studied this in so many diseases, isn't it? So now they said whenever neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio is increased, okay, this means that this patient is going to have a high inflammatory response. That is, high cytokine storm is there, okay. That is why there is high neutrophil lymphocyte ratio. Group patients, there is high prevalence of myocardial injury, and therefore they have high incidence of in-hospital death. So therefore, now they are doing neutrophil lymphocyte ratio also to identify the cytokine storm and to identify those people who are going to have death during hospitalization. So these were some common hematological parameters which help you in telling, not only in picking up how the patient is going to behave, it is also going to tell you the prognosis. So is everybody clear till here? Okay, so once we are very clear with here, now let's come to the peripheral smear. So that's the second thing which we are seeing, okay? So peripheral smear in COVID patients. So if you take a peripheral smear in COVID patient, it's a viral infection, and all viral infections usually show you what? Reactive lymphocytes. So one thing all of you have seen, that lymphopenia is a definitive finding. So you will be seeing lymphopenia. Apart from that, you will see a lot of reactive lymphocytes. So what do you understand by reactive lymphocytes? So you will be seeing a lot of lymphoplasmacytoid cells. You will be seeing a lot of dysmyelopoiesis, because COVID storm damages the precursors in the bone marrow also. So these might cause dysmyelopoiesis also. So you can see abnormal granularity in the myeloid cells. You can see apoptotic cells. You can see abnormal spindles. You can see perinuclear halos. Okay, so dysmyelopoiesis can be seen. Apart from that, you will be seeing large platelets. Can everybody identify that? So these are large platelets. So there has been again a lot of study which correlates with the morphological abnormalities of platelets in COVID. So they said that COVID patients usually have large platelet, that everybody knows. We have also seen that they have large MPV and they have large PLCR, isn't it? So that is large platelets are there. But if you look at them, so they usually have large hyperchromatic platelets, and they're usually peripheral areas. They say that, you know, their peripheral areas are usually having some vacuoles or some variable areas which can be seen in the periphery. Okay, so more studies are going on in this. Okay, so this is very, very important finding here. You see, so what do you see? Large platelets you can see basically, and some of them are hyperchromatic, and the peripheral area can show various areas of daily functions. Okay, so that's the finding that is described on the peripheral smear of the COVID patients. Okay, so what are the predominant findings of the peripheral smear then? You saw lymphopenia, you see lots of reactive lymphocytes like lymphoplasmacytoid cells, you saw a lot of dysmyelopoiesis, and you can see large hyperchromatic platelets. So these are the findings in the peripheral smear of COVID patients which you can see. Okay, so once we are clear with the peripheral smear, now let's come to the third parameter of the hematological parameter, that is coagulopathy in COVID patient. This is a very, very important topic. You know, majority of the cases, you know, if you've read the newspaper, there was a sudden highlight which came 10 days before that, oh my God, the cause of death in COVID patient is not ARDS, it is a coagulopathy. You know, so that was a very recent, so everything what we are studying is a very recent thing, you know, and they are coming and knowing facts, new and newer facts every day. So they found now that the most common cause of death in COVID patients in today's time is coagulopathy. Okay, so they usually die due to coagulopathy, and therefore coagulopathy in COVID patients became the highlight. Okay, so let us see what is the coagulation abnormality which is seen in COVID patients. So if you look at the coagulopathy in COVID patients, these patients usually have high incidence of thrombosis. Okay, so even so because of high incidence of thrombosis, so the coagulation factors are consumed, because of which PT and APTT are increased. Okay, so now they found that PT and APTT is increased, but strangely they found that APTT could even be normal. So PT is more increased than APTT. So which is more increased? PT is more increased than APTT. Why so? Because factor 8 is an acute phase reactant. So it increases. So because factor 8 increases, therefore APTT becomes normal. Okay, or If it is increased, it is mildly increased. Understood? So because factor VIII is an acute phase reactant, it normalizes the coagulation factor and APTT remains normal or mildly increased. Okay, whereas PT is more increased. So when we talk about PT and APTT, remember PT is more increased than APTT in COVID patients. That's number one. Number two, remember fibrinogen levels in COVID patients is increased. Why so? Because fibrinogen is also an acute phase reactant. So its level will be increased. Its level will be increased. Now, third, there will be increased FDPs and D-dimer. Why so? Because you know that there is inflammation, cytokine storm. So a lot of cytokine storm causes injury to the endothelium. And you know endothelium, whenever it's injured, it releases tissue plasminogen activators into the blood. So these tissue plasminogen activators can break both, it can break fibrin and it can even break cross-linked fibrin. I hope you know that when just fibrin is broken down, it causes FDP increase. When cross-linked fibrin is broken down, it causes increase in the D-dimer. Okay, so whenever the fibrin becomes cross-linked by factor 13 and it is broken down by plasminogen activators, that causes D-dimers. So because both are broken down, linked, cross-linked fibrin also and simple fibrin also, so that results in formation of FDP. Also, because fibrinogen levels is high, so because there is more fibrinogen, these can also be broken down to form lot of FDPs and D-dimers. So FDPs basically, okay. So that is why FDP and D-dimers are increased in these patients. And obviously, you know that the platelet count is decreased, but mildly decreased. So if we have to summarize, what is the coagulopathy in COVID patients, what we studied? So these patients had increased PT. So PT is more increased than APTT. There is increased fibrinogen. There is increased FDP and D-dimer and mild decrease in platelets. So therefore, let's make a statement which was made by the Lancet Hematology. So Lancet Hematology said that three important coagulation complications which are seen in COVID patients are increased prothrombin time, increased FDPs and D-dimers. So because of all these three, there is increased incidence of, so this also, because there is a procoagulant state in the body, because fibrinogen is also increased, this increases the risk of vascular thromboembolism. Now, let's come to another important fact that Lancet Hematology told us. So they said that the prothrombin time, which is elevated in COVID patient, is only mildly elevated. Okay, so it is also not very severely elevated. So if you express the report in the form of INR, which we commonly do, isn't it? So PTs are usually reported as INR. If you report them, these changes in the PT will be missed. So it is always better in COVID era to report PT in the terms of seconds. Okay, so that becomes very, very important. Whereas if you report them as INR, you might miss the subtle changes. So that was one important caution which was given by Lancet Hematology, which we should all remember. Okay, so that was what PT. Now, what about if I am saying that there is increased D-dimer, isn't it? So why this is not DIC? So therefore, they gave a very distinct term to COVID-associated coagulopathy, which is predominantly now called as CAC, that is COVID-associated coagulopathy. And it is very different from DIC. So first point is, yes, D-dimers are elevated in DIC also. But remember, D-dimers are markedly increased in coagulation-associated coagulopathy. Second, DIC will usually have decreased fibrinogen levels. Whereas in COVID-associated coagulopathy, your fibrinogen levels will be elevated. Not only that, you know, PT elevation is more than APTT. This is very typical of CAC, COVID-associated coagulopathy. Thrombocytopenia is very severe in DIC, whereas thrombocytopenia is mild in COVID-associated coagulopathy. Okay, D-dimers levels are very high in COVID-associated coagulopathy. Okay, whereas in DIC also they are elevated, but they are not so much elevated. In this, it is like 3 to 4 time increase. Okay, and fourth, you all know that DIC is one of the type of microangiopathic hemolytic anemia. So it can show you, schistocytes. Whereas here, in COVID-associated coagulopathy, microangiopathies are usually not present. So you'll not see schistocytes. So remember, how is CAC different from DIC then? What are the features that you studied? So number one, PT is more elevated than APTT. Number 2, thrombocytopenia is mild. Number 3, significantly elevated D-dimer. Number 4, microangiopathy is not present. Number 5, elevated fibrinogen. So fibrinogen level is elevated, whereas it is decreased in DIC. So do you understand this? So everybody should be very clear with the COVID-associated coagulopathy. Now, one more thing. So there was a recent study which said post-mortem finding of the COVID patient started coming, okay? So when they started studying post-mortem finding of the COVID patient, they found that these patients, especially in their lungs and other organs, had lot of thrombotic occlusions. So lot of microvascular occlusions, thrombus was present. So when they studied this thrombus, they found that all these thrombus were platelet rich. So they found that this was a platelet rich thrombus occlusions. So they said, are we dealing with thrombotic microangiopathy other than DIC? So can you tell me what is the other thrombotic microangiopathy other than DIC? What is it? Like HUS, like TTP. So they started thinking in terms of TTP. So are we dealing with TTP? Are we dealing with TTP? So they started thinking about that. So then they started searching. No, it is not TTP also. Why? Because there is no evidence of hemolysis. There is no schistocytes in the peripheral blood. And platelet count in thrombotic microangiopathies, TTP is very, very decreased. Here it is mildly decreased. So it was not TTP also. It is not thrombotic microangiopathy also. So it is not DIC. It is not thrombotic microangiopathy, but it is having features of both of them. So there are a lot of microvascular thrombi, there is increased D-dimers, okay, there is thrombocytopenia, more highly raised PT. So what is this? So they said, so the guidelines again, so there was a very beautiful study by the Journal of Thrombosis. So they said actually coagulation associated CAC with COVID is a combination of low-grade DIC and localized pulmonary thrombotic microangiopathy. It's a combination of both of them. It's a combination of both of them. Now, all of you have studied, you know, whenever we have endothelial damage, okay? So whenever something damages the endothelium, von Willebrand factor is released in the circulation. So this von Willebrand factor binds with GP1B of the platelets, okay? And this start forming multimers. So all these von Willebrand factors start binding with the GP1B of the platelets, and this starts forming multimers. So who comes and break these multimers? ADAMTS. So it is ADAMTS which will come and break this multimers, okay? So that thrombi is not formed. So they said, why is thrombus forming in this patient? Okay, why is this patient getting thrombus? That means, is ADAMTS deficient in them? You know, which is the condition where ADAMTS is deficient? Thrombotic, yes, thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura, TTP, which we study, isn't it? So it doesn't have ADAMTS. So they started thinking that whether CAC has deficiency of ADAMTS, but there's no study in the literature which has still studied ADAMTS status in the COVID. So they said that this study should be done. ADAMTS study should be done in COVID patient to understand the exact pathogenesis of coagulopathy associated with COVID, okay? So they started doing plasma exchange, and they found that plasma exchange was helpful in patient of COVID. Why? Because the postulation was that actually with plasma therapy or plasma exchange, you were actually replenishing the ADAMTS from the plasma, and you are also removing the inflammatory mediator. So you're decreasing the cytokine storm, and you're also giving ADAMTS, so it breaks the thrombi, okay? It breaks the thrombi. So that is why plasma exchange can be helpful in patients of COVID. Is everybody clear with this? Yes. So that's a very, very important finding that came up in CAC. So now, once we are clear with this, now another thing which we all should know is what should be the diagnostic approach. So once we know that prothrombin time, platelet count and D-dimer are to be measured, when should they be measured? So it is not one-time measurement that is important. It should be serial measurements. Every second to third day you have to measure. Why? Because serial rising of D-dimer is associated with poor prognosis. So it should always be a serial measurement every 2 to 3 days. And this guideline was by Lancet Hematology 2020. So they also, so just now I told you what should you do? Serial measurement. So there was a study which was done which compared the coagulation functions between severe and non-severe patients. Okay. So what did they found? They found that patients, okay, who had a severe disease usually had increased fibrinogen levels, that you know because it's an acute phase reactant, increased D-dimer levels, and they introduce a parameter here which is called FAR. Okay, so what is this FAR? This is nothing but fibrinogen to albumin ratio. Okay, fibrinogen to albumin ratio. So all of you know albumin is a negative acute phase reactant. Okay, so whenever there is a lot of inflammation, albumin levels start falling down. Okay, whereas fibrinogen levels are high in COVID. So what will happen to the FAR ratio in COVID? It will be increased. So they found that if you follow up a patient of severe versus non-severe, okay, coagulation associated COVID patient, you will find that people who have a severe disease will have increased fibrinogen levels, they will have increased D-dimer levels, and they will have increased FAR ratios. So all these three will be increased. Also, just now you've studied that albumin is a negative phase reactant. So albumin levels are decreased in severe patients. So more the inflammation, more the albumin will be decreased. Also, they found that platelet count also correlated with this severity seen in previous studies. So as soon as the severity of the disease increased, the platelet count also fall down. So therefore they gave a statement. Okay, so there was a statement which was given here. So the statement that came up was that, so if any patient on admission, so that's a very, very important point, on admission, if a patient had fibrinogen albumin ratio less than 0.08, and if he has platelet count more than 1.35 lakh, these patients will have low probability of severe disease. So these patients will have very low probability of severe disease. So I hope you understand why. So if fibrinogen is not very high, albumin is not very decreased, so far should be less than 0.08, and if the platelet count is more than 1.35, these patients will usually not progress to severe disease. This was a very beautiful parameter and very beautiful statement which was made. Okay, so that's your severity of the coagulation between severe and non-severe patient that was given on the basis of coagulation parameters. Now, once we have started this, we should all know that any patient of COVID-associated coagulopathy can progress into DIC. So you should not just say, okay, D-dimer is increased. Okay. So this could be COVID-associated coagulopathy. Let's forget it. No, any patient of COVID-associated coagulopathy can progress into frank DIC. So therefore, we always have to do one scoring on them. This scoring is called as ICTH scoring, that is International Society of Thrombosis and Hemostasis scoring. So this scoring is based on 4 important parameters. Number 1, platelet count. Number 2, fibrinogen levels. Number 3, prothrombin time. Number 4, D-dimer. So it's based upon 4 important findings. Okay, so platelet count, fibrinogen level, prothrombin time, and D-dimer. So let me give you an example of CAC first. Okay, so I hope you know that CAC patient, the platelet count is decreased, but usually is mildly decreased. Okay, so let's say the mildly decreased means less than 1 lakh. Okay, so let's say the count here, the score here that we get is 1. Now, fibrinogen level is increased in patients of CAC. So here score will be 0. Prothrombin time is decreased, but mildly, prothrombin time is increased, but mildly increased. Okay, so let's say here also 0. Okay, so prolonged but less than 3 seconds. Okay, so this is 0, or it can be 3 to 5 also. 1, let's say it can be 0 or it can be 1. Now D-dimer levels are strongly increased. Okay, so D-dimer levels are strongly increased or moderately increased. So let's say count is 2. So here, let's say what is the score which is coming here? 1 plus 2, 3. So for making a diagnosis of DIC, you require score of more than or equal to 5. So you know, whenever there is this DIC, the platelet count is very severely decreased. So here the score will become 2. Fibrinogen level is decreased. So here the level will be 1. Prothrombin dimer, say 2. Say D-dimer is increased, so 2. So 2, 4, 5, 6. See here, the score becomes 6. So do you understand this difference between ISTH scoring in in COVID-associated coagulopathy versus DIC? So everybody should remember, how do you make a so every patient of CAC, you should try doing this score, because any patient of CAC can progress into DIC. So you should not miss these cases. Everybody clear with this? Yes. So that's ICTH scoring for DIC, which should be done in all CAC patients. So once we are clear with this, what have we studied then? To just compile what we have studied. So to study, we studied that most of the patients with severe COVID will have very high D-dimer levels, will have prolonged prothrombin time, but it will be mild prolongation only, and there will be low platelet count. And these also suggest hypercoagulable state that you are seeing in DIC. So once we are clear with this, now let me just show you the very important fact here. So when we say when we say outcomes, okay, so what level of D-dimer will correlate with the mortality rate? So there are a lot of studies in the literature in which different cutoffs were given. Okay, so the first study in the Wuhan gave a cutoff of 1 microgram per ml, and then this every study came up with the different cutoff levels of the D-dimer, which is associated with mortality, depending upon the instrument that you use and the assay that you use. So there are a lot of studies which give different cutoffs for the D-dimer levels. So why so much variability? Remember, D-dimer has lots of compounding factors. Okay, so D-dimer results have lots of compounding factors. So we can have lot of errors. The errors can be pre-analytical, analytical, or post-analytical. Pre-analytical means those errors which occur before start of test. Analytical means those errors which occur during the test. Post-analytical occurs which occurs after doing the test. So what are the pre-analytical errors which are seen in the COVID patients? So if you're talking about the pre-analytical errors, everybody should remember here that slower blood collection can cause hemolysis. So therefore, you have to use a needle with a gauge size of 19 to 22 gauze for taking the sample. This tube should always be kept in a vertical position during transportation. The test should usually be done within 3 hours of collection, but to the maximum, the stability is over 24. And there is a very high frequency of clogged needles. Why? Because fibrinogen levels are high, D-dimers are high, so needles of the instrument will get clogged. So therefore, it is mandatory for everybody to know that needle cleaning has to be done once every shift. Okay, so needle cleaning has to be done once every shift, so that the clogged needle should be cleaned and the results should not be altered. So these are pre-analytical errors which occur in D-dimer testing. What about the analytical errors? So everybody should know that D-dimers can interfere with bilirubin, lipids, hemolysis, and paraprotein. So you should not have hyperlipemic sample. You should not have jaundiced sample. You should not have hemolyzed samples, and not having paraproteins, not multiple myeloma or CLPD patients. So please remember this. These are analytical errors. If they are present, you should take proper precautions. Okay. Whereas post-analytical problems are also very common. You know why? Because there are different units which are used for D-dimer testing, and different instruments are used, different assays are used. So there are lots and lots of errors in that. I hope everybody knows that D-dimer can be reported either as fibrinogen equivalent unit, or it can be reported as D-dimer unit. And all of you nearly should know that one fibrinogen equivalent unit is equivalent to 2 D-dimer unit. Okay, and it depends upon, and the cutoff for ruling out embolism, pulmonary embolism, is different depending upon the assay that you are using. So everybody should use what instrument you're using, whatever assay you should know your cutoffs well. Okay, and then you should make a diagnosis. Otherwise, even if the D-dimer is elevated and you will miss it, that should not be happening, because that's one of the very common post-analytical error. Okay, so everybody should be very cautious with this. Okay, so now once we are clear with the coagulation system, so what have you learned from coagulation system? You have learned about COVID-associated coagulopathy, which is very important. I hope you have learned that COVID-associated coagulopathy has mildly increased in the prothrombin time. It has increased in the D-dimer level. Fibrinogen levels are increased. Okay, FDPs are increased. Okay, APTT remains normal or very mildly increased because factor reaction. So it is normal, okay? And I hope you should understand why the FDPs and D-dimers are increased, because there is endothelial injury because of cytokine storm, which releases a lot of tissue plasminogen activators, which breaks it down. So these are COVID-associated coagulopathy, and you know that it is actually a combination of low-grade DIC and thrombotic microangiopathy. You also know that plasma exchange can be used in it, and you also know that there are a lot of pre-analytical, analytical, and post-analytical errors which you should be clear about. Once you're clear about this, now let's come to the immune system abnormalities. Though I'll not go much in details in this because there'll be a separate lecture on it, but just one thing I have to tell you, we have already talked about that normally CD4 CD8 ratios are decreased, isn't it, in your COVID patients, but there is no inversion of 4:8 ratio, which you can see on flow cytometry. Now, one important point you have to remember here is that whenever virus enters into the body, it immediately activates regulatory T cells. I hope everybody knows what are regulatory T cells. Regulatory T cells are those T cells which suppress the inflammation, which suppress the immunity. So these regulatory T cells suppress the immunity. So when the immunity is suppressed, this virus proliferates like anything. When it proliferates, it breaks down CD4 and CD8 cells. And CD8 cells are typically notorious because CD8 cells are cytotoxic T cells, and these are the ones which can kill the virus. So there is rapid exhaustion of CD8 cells, and therefore virus cannot be killed now. Okay, so that's a very, very important parameter, and this is again an area of research. I hope you know regulatory T cells can be identified by interleukin-2 receptor or FOXP3 also, okay? So FOXP3 is a different marker. Interleukin-2 receptor is also identified by CD25, okay? So remember, regulatory T cells are usually identified by interleukin-2 receptor, which is also called CD25, or they can be identified by FOXP3. So remember, which T cells are increased in COVID patient? Regulatory T cells, and this is an area of active research, okay? So we will see that right now. So when we talk about biochemistry, so biochemistry, I'm not going into detail, only I'll be taking out hematology from the biochemical finding. So normally LDH levels are very high in patients. We have already seen that this also correlates with the severity. But one unique thing, serum ferritin is a very good acute phase reactant. Not only that, they found that this correlates very well with the cytokine storm or macrophage activation. So this correlates very well with the cytokine storm. So serum ferritin levels are usually elevated in patients of COVID, and this is a very important hematological parameter that we use. Apart from that, procalcitonin and interleukin-6 are also increased. Procalcitonin and interleukin-6 are also increased. Not only that, ESR of this patient is also increased. Because of so many acute phase reactants, fibrinogen is increased, so ESR is also elevated. C-reactive protein is also elevated. Apart from that, PCT is procalcitonin. Procalcitonin and serum ferritin is also elevated. Do you see this? Interleukin-2 receptor. Do you understand what is this? This is regulatory T cells. So interleukin-2 receptors are all increased. Apart from that, interleukin-6, interleukin-8, interleukin-10 are also increased. So these are very, very important findings, okay, which are associated findings, which are seen in your COVID patient. So once we are knowing with this, let me show you one beautiful study which I came across. Okay, so this study is from Kidney International. So they found, this was published just recently, and it was a very interesting study. They found actually in patients of chronic kidney disease who undergo hemodialysis every time. So they usually undergo their routine ferritin examination. So what happened is in March 2020, that is 1 month before the diagnosis, they just took ferritin levels for some of their patients, kidney patients on hemodialysis. So they found that majority of the patients had ferritin levels of 500 nanogram per ml. So I hope you know chronic kidney disease have mildly increased ferritin levels. Okay, so their ferritin levels was increased. Okay. Now, what happened is all those patients who became COVID positive, okay, so they started taking their ferritin levels, and they found that the ferritin level was markedly increased, and their ferritin level was more than 1000. So from 500 to 1000, so markedly increased ferritin level. So they started measuring the ferritin levels in all these patients. So they decided to make a cutoff. So when they made cutoff, they found that all the patients who were COVID positive at the diagnosis had their ferritin levels more than 800 nanogram per ml. Okay, other patients, that is what the study says, that they are, whenever a hemodialysis patient is suddenly presenting with a very, very high levels of ferritin, they start suspecting COVID in them, okay, even without symptoms, and they send him for investigation. So this was one of the very beautiful study which I came across, and the ferritin is therefore a very good marker which correlates with your cytokine storm, okay. Now, so after we have finished all this, so I hope you're clear with this, and what are the take-home points that you should take from here? So, early diagnosis and follow-up of the patient using hematological parameters will give you so much information. You should identify the patient at high risk using all these hematological parameters. Pre-analytical and post-analytical errors should be avoided. Of course, analytical should also be avoided. But pre-post should be very less than this. Also, thromboprophylaxis is very, very important in your COVID patient. So therefore, you can add low molecular weight heparin. In fact, most of the regimens now add low molecular weight heparin, not only for thromboprophylaxis, but also for its anti-inflammatory property. So it decreases little bit of cytokine storm and decreases the symptoms. So that is your take-home message. So everybody, are you clear with the hematological manifestations? I hope you will be able to understand something. Yes, so that was your hematological manifestations of COVID. So this is my hospital. This is our beautiful hospital where we have the statue of Lady Hardinge. So this is a beautiful statue here. Lady Hardinge is sitting here. So normally this is studied with students. Okay, so in the era of social distancing, we are not able to identify anything. Okay, but you can see a couple here, isn't it? Standing couple here. Okay, so but remember, so together we can, and we will fight corona. So everybody, you should be knowing all the hematological manifestations, which is very, very important, okay, to solve the give a better prognosis to the patient. Okay, so this is your hematological manifestations of COVID, which everybody should be clear about. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Vandana. Very informative and very elaborated talk you have done. A few things which I want to say to the beginners, that when you examine a peripheral smear, like you have shown the abnormalities of lymphocytes and the large platelets, they have to differentiate a large platelet from the EDTA effect. That will show a lot of vacuolization, and you will not see these darker areas in the platelet. Second thing is, you can compare it with the size of the RBC. If it is, normally it is less than 1/3 of the size of the RBC. But if it is half to up to the size of RBC, it is large. If it is more than RBC, it is giant platelet, right? Second thing is the D-dimer. This is very important, which you have highlighted, is the unit. Because this has happened in our lab also, in our hospital also, not with the COVID, but some other patient. Ma'am, आपकी lab से 0.5 था, वहाँ की lab से 250 आया है. So, because the unit here is microgram per FU, the other lab nanogram. So it is very important to know which unit you are reporting the D-dimer, right? So now you can answer the questions. I think most of it has already been covered.
So Bridge Mohan is asking, what is LMWH? That is low molecular weight heparin. Okay, so that is the short form of low molecular weight heparin. Okay. Okay, are immune thrombocytopenic purpuric individual, otherwise normal, are more susceptible after being diagnosed with COVID? Are ITP patients more susceptible to COVID? That is what you want to ask, Chandra Prakash? Is that your question? Are ITP patients more susceptible to COVID? That's what you have to say. I didn't find any study.
They have thrombocytopenic episode once they got infected, because it's a viral infection. If it is, the question is like ITP individual, otherwise normal, are more susceptible after being diagnosed COVID. So they can have a decrease in the platelet count. Yes, like in COVID patient, the stroke is more, the MI is more. Similarly, the fall in platelet can be more.
Okay, what else? Any other question?
I think one question was on DIC, which was already been explained. The first question was, do we give platelet transfusion in these patients? I think platelet transfusion is not for, or any parameter, lab parameter is not just for correction of the parameter. It depends upon the clinical stage of the patient. So if the patient is having bleeding, then you can think of a platelet transfusion. Otherwise, just to correct the parameters that the PT is prolonged, so correct the PT, or APT is prolonged, correct it, that is not required.
There's also one question by Dr. Prabhi. Why ICU patients have significantly decreased lymphocyte counts? Mechanism that we explained, no? So because, because we told just now, no? So there are actually lymphocytes have that ACE2 receptor also, and plus more the cytokine storm, more the apoptosis of the lymphocyte. So more the severity, more the cytokine storm, more the apoptosis. That's the mechanism, isn't it? So that's the answer to this question. Okay. Okay, any other? So if peripheral smear is COVID positive, shows schistocytes. So now that's what I told, no? Schistocytes are not present in COVID positive patient. That's what we have to know. Okay, DIC we have answered. Any other question?
And I think is whether PS or coagulopathy, which is used for more diagnostic. Some question was like that. Actually, CBC and PS, nothing is very specific for COVID per se. Diagnosis is based on the RT-PCR or other methods, whichever is used.
So there is a question by Dr. Mushtaq. Is there any change in the RBCs? In RBC? No, there is no change in the RBCs, isn't it? Only in WBC we told, no, there can be dysmyelopoiesis, lymphopenia is there, and platelet is enlarged. So no change in the RBC. Okay, and schistocytes are not seen. Okay. Can we get hematological and coagulation parameter as a diagnostic tool? Oh, diagnostic tool means?
Diagnostic nahi hai.
No
test is diagnostic.
डायग्नोसिस तो हम लोग कोविड टेस्ट से कर रहे हैं ना, माइक्रोबायोलॉजी से कर रहे हैं. ये तो सिर्फ प्रोग्नोस्टिक टूल है ना. Can a patient with COVID present with leukocytosis and thrombocytosis? So this way, I told you the chart starting only, no? So this can be seen but rare, okay? So next is Nipandas. Can we do coagulation analysis without centrifuge? So if we keep a sample for 1 hour and do it with plasma, is that possible?
Ideally, one should not do it. Because we have to make platelet poor plasma, that is the prerequisite of p-analytical variable. So one should not do it. You can centrifuge it, leave it for 30 minutes, and then you can open it.
Okay, so the question, Dr. Prabhi, but why for ICU patient? ICU patient in that study meant severity of the patient. Do you understand that? So it was severity of the patient. That was meant, what was meant by ICU versus non-ICU patient. Okay. Okay. So now, next is Chandra Prakash. TB are doing frequently in CAC? What is this? TP? I don't understand the question.
Well, I think we have had a wonderful presentation from Dr. Vandana Puri. Thank you so much. And it was really very informative for those into hematological assessment and for general public also. So our students are quite interested to ask a few more questions, but then since the session has already been extended, so I would like to put an end to it. It was really a very exhaustive presentation. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Dr. Sunita.
I must thank Sunita ma'am so much. She has helped me a lot in the presentation, and I thank you ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you for inviting us. And TP, they have told from therapeutic plasma exchange. Yeah, I told you, no, plasma exchange is basically now we are using it. We can use it because it can. We do not know. Okay, so it's more studies still on. So let's see what comes out. Okay. Yes. Thank you so much, sir, for inviting us.
Our pleasure, madam. We are like blessed to have you on our panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. It was the highest number. 185 participants were there in this.
Okay.
Continuously.
Thank you.
Ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.